If you sit down and scroll through your phone, if you scroll through your news app, you're going to find news articles. If you scroll through your social media feed, you're going to find social media posts. And if you follow some accounts, they will be cartoons or some will be poets. You can find all kinds of different types of things to read on your phone. Or back in my day, if you would pick up a newspaper that was delivered to your house, you would see news articles. There would be editorials, which is similar to, analogous to social media. And you would have cartoon section, comic strip sections. You would have classified ads. And as you read different things, you have a different mindset as you read them. For instance, if you sit down and read poetry, you know that the language is metaphorical. You know that the words are symbolic, and you read into it to find a deeper meaning. If you're reading a news article, it's going to be a factual accounting. And you're going to read that in a different way than you would read poetry. If you're reading comics, in your mind, you know that it's just to make you laugh. And it's important to distinguish all these things when we read. Otherwise, we wouldn't understand what the author is trying to convey. The same is true when we sit down to read scripture. In the first video, I talked about a bunch of different writings that were found in scripture. And if we try to read letters that were sent to specific churches addressing specific issues, the same way that we read wisdom writings or historical narratives, then we're going to have some difficulty. All of these things have a different purpose and method in their writing. For instance, the Gospels, let's look at the four of those: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I want to sit John to the side for a little bit, because John's book report on his life with Jesus comes from a completely different angle from the other three. Matthew, Mark, and Luke kind of take a chronological timeline approach to their writing about Jesus. John's approach is a little more metaphorical, and when you read the Gospel of John, you can read into all of the metaphor and all the symbols, and you got to be careful doing that in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But as you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you're reading stories of what it was like for them when they followed Jesus. Now, when you read a letter that Paul wrote, say you're reading a letter to the Galatians, you're hearing one side of a conversation. Paul started a church in Galatia. They would experience difficulties. They would get word to Paul about their questions and their difficulties, and Paul would respond in a written letter to them. And those that were saved or discovered or found were really fortunate. We get to lean in a little bit and hear about what was going on in the struggles of these early churches. And a lot of the lessons that they were needing to learn can be applied to what we need to learn also. And now, as we look at Old Testament or First Testament scripture, we need to have the same understanding. Are we reading a psalm? Are we reading a narrative? So knowing what we are reading is the first step in greater understanding.